So this is the April 21st, 2025 meeting of the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. My name is Diane Cece. I'm on the board. I'm the president of the association. Um, just a quick run through on the agenda that has some announcements on it, and then we do have a guest speaker for tonight. This announcement may seem obvious, but there were so many starts and stops on this project. We just want to make sure that everyone is aware now that the closure of Strawberry Hill Avenue at Winfield under the railroad bridge is now in effect, and the detours are in effect. I happened to be out and about this weekend myself, and I noticed quite a bit of gridlock that I think was relevant to that, but there were a number of events going on too, so it was a little bit hard to tell. We did post in one of our recent newsletters that we would like folks to provide some feedback to us and to the city and to the Walk Bridge project folks, what you're experiencing out there as these detours are in place. Because this work is scheduled as of now to go through at least October of this year. Just a couple of meetings. Of course, we can't follow and post the entire city agenda, but we wanted to bring two meetings to your attention. One is the special permit application for Norton Park for a car club and event venue. That public hearing is scheduled for May 7th. We'll post the time and the Zoom, and also that will be in person in council chambers at City Hall as well. And then relative to our guests that we're about to hear from, the Manresa Island Park community session, engagement session number 2 has been scheduled for May 8th at Brian McMahon. And we'll post more information on that as we get closer. And also our guest speaker will speak to that. Before I introduce our guest speaker, just a couple of items. These are the items we wanted to talk about should timing permit tonight. There are a number of applications that are in or developments in progress and some new applications that folks were eager to talk about, and also the current Walk Bridge projects. And then we have a couple of ideas that we've been talking with people in the community about that we think could be very good community forums for us to hold, and possibly in person. Our next meeting is May 19th. And with that, let me hop over here. Okay, so tonight we are welcoming our guest speaker, Jessica Vonashek, the Executive Director of Manresa Island Park. She's going to be presenting a condensed version of the project plans that were presented at Brian McMahon the first time and will be coming up again in May 8th. And just a little background here for you. Jessica is the executive director. It's a nonprofit responsible for remediating, restoring, and building out, and then managing a transformation of the 125-acre waterfront. It's a decommissioned power plant, and their plan is to turn it into a park that's open to the public. Jessica recently worked for the city of Norwalk. So if you recognize her name, it's because she was our chief of community and economic development, and she oversaw planning and zoning, transportation, mobility, and parking, building code enforcement, and building and development and tourism. In these roles, she focused on attracting businesses and tourists, streamlining permitting, and improving transportation. Prior to moving to Norwalk, Jessica was the Chief Operation Officer for Operations Policy and Oversight at the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, and was previously the Economic Development Director at the Plymouth Regional Economic Development Foundation. He's worked at the Project on Municipal Innovation Advisory Group at the Harvard Kennedy School and at the Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, where she led research and strategic policy development. Jessica is a Norwalk resident. She enjoys spending time outdoors, especially hiking and being on the water. And we would like you to extend a welcome as best we can to Jessica Vonashek.
Okay, well, Happy April 21st, everybody. Hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. Really happy to be here meeting with you on Manresa Island Park. I'm going to run through the deck that I have here, and I'm happy to take questions and answers as we go along, and we'll go from there. So wanted to, let's see if I can change. Okay, so the story of Manresa Island Park, if you haven't heard, is that it is a 125-acre site. It has almost 2 acres of coastline. And as the story goes, Allison and Austin McCord, who have a home here in Norwalk in Wilson Point, were we're enjoying a sunny day and sort of out and about one day and just said, we think Manresa should really be a park, and we think that we can have a hand in being able to make that happen. And as you all know, NRG had been there for years, and Argent Ventures had actually purchased the site for residential development, and we're thinking about using the site to be able to remediate it and use it for that very very limited number of units, and also a potential marina. And they had filed an application with planning and zoning, and they were going through the process. And in the background, Allison and Austin were working with Argent Ventures in order to be able to explore purchasing the property and being able to explore actually creating a nonprofit to make that happen. And they were successful in doing that. And as a follow-up to that, they created a nonprofit called Manresa Island Corp, and that was established in 2024. The mission is to inspire engagement through waterfront, through public access and programming activities, all centered around the water, that help to not only bring the public to the waterfront, but also establish a place for research and a place for learning as well. As part of the mission, the Manresa Island Corp is responsible for a number of different things. One of the things was to purchase the site from Argent Ventures, but even more significant is to take on the remediation of the site, the restoration of the site, the build out of the park, and then the long-term maintenance in perpetuity of the park itself. And so an all-inclusive responsibility list. And, a lot of what's been driving the conversations and about what we've been talking about is thinking about being a good neighbor and how to be a good neighbor and how to really be able to give the city of Norwalk and the region an asset that just has not been available in the past. And so thinking about how to do sensitive programming and use sustainable and resilient design strategies, thinking about how to limit the construction period on the site, how to remediate the site using really unique approaches that allow us to keep the birch forest in place. And thinking about how to secure the site has been all conversations that we've been having. We've also had conversations about different feedback that we've received specifically from the March 5th community engagement meeting, where we've heard a number of different levels of excitement for the project, but also some concerns, and thinking about how to address those concerns. And we'll get more feedback as we continue to do community engagement. And so I encourage everybody to participate in that, and we'll talk a little bit more about timing. But being a good neighbor is something that's really important to us. And the other thing that's really important is just this public access to water. And this map is one of my favorite maps because it shows the coastline of Darien over to Westport, and it shows all of the private coastline in orange and all of the public coastline in green. And what you can end up seeing is that a lot of the green is actually the islands, the Norwalk Islands, which we know a lot of them are not actually even accessible to the public, right? It's one thing if you paddleboard, or it's one thing if you kayak, but to a large extent, the city of Norwalk and the surrounding region just do not have access to the water. And so this site is particularly important and significant in the sense that there's almost 2 miles of coastline that encompass Manresa Island. And as you know, it's not really an island, it's actually a peninsula. But the 2 miles of coastline is something that we're really excited to give the public access to. And thinking about how to engage the public and be able to make that connection. And so in the image above, you can see this is a redesign and a rendering, a potential possibility for the pier that is this federally dredged channel where the coal used to come in for the power plant. And you can see here, there's a research vessel on the left-hand side and something that we call a plunge pool, which is the ability to allow residents and different community members to be able to swim. And then this activation with some food trucks along the promenade. And the below image is showing how we can think about boardwalks in the salt marsh. Part of the discussion is really being able to give the public exposure to the wildlife and exposure to the environment in order to be able to ensure that children and that people of all ages have the ability to see why it's so important that these things exist and see the importance of them, and really to spur an interest and spur a passion in different groups of people that have the ability to make change over time and be able to really allow them that exposure to the environment in which they may not currently have. And all of this leads to this slide, which I also love, which is really to say that, you know, Manresa is one of many. And so all of the green dots on this map show retired power plants. The lighter green shows future retirements. And, you know, it just goes to show that there's a lot of sites, particularly on water, because the plants use the water to cool the mechanisms and cool the systems in the actual power plant itself. And so a large number of these are actually on the waterfront. And, you know, to a large extent, nothing is really happening with them because the remediation is such a heavy lift and the sites are incredibly large and they have these different structures on them that people don't really know exactly what to do with them. And so we're hoping that this can be a model for not only Connecticut, but a lot of the states across the Northeast. So in the process where we are right now is that we've completed the March 5th meeting. We had 719 RSVPs for the meeting. We actually were originally going to hold it in the Maritime Aquarium and we moved it to Brian McMahon. And we just had a really great turnout. The weather was really crummy. If anybody remembers that day and was able to join us on March the 5th, it was kind of raining sideways that day. And we had a really great turnout. It was absolutely amazing. And so right now we are still in this community engagement phase. May 8th is the next engagement meeting. And then we're going to go into concept design. And concept design is really being able to take what has been shown as like a possibility for the island versus what we hear from community engagement and what people want to see on the island and how they want us to think about prioritizing that. And that goes into design documentation, which is really a technical time period of how to actually take the concepts and the renderings that we have created through public community engagement to being able to actually have something that can go out to bid for a construction company to come in and actually start construction and actually fulfill this plan of the park. This slide is shown like a very linear line, when in fact it's not really a linear line at all. There's a lot of different pieces that go into this, and between remediation and planning and being able to think about how to move the site along in a meaningful way. And so this really simplifies it, but I wanted to show you sort of the different pieces of how this site plan will move forward. This slide really just speaks to, as we work through the previous slide, whether it be concept design or documentation or construction, these are really the 5 guiding visions for Manresa Island Corp. And we'll get into these a little bit more, but I wanted to just highlight them for you. They're things that we come back to each and every day as we do our work with the city and with the state and with the community. We're constantly coming back to these 5 takeaways, which is to be able to have a place like no other that's welcome for all, that we use forward thinking and remediation and resiliency, that we support academic learning and discovery, and also just everyday learning and discovery. And we revitalize this ecology. And doing that is working with this master plan team. And we've been working with the master plan team for a year and a half, far longer than when I came on board. And this team has been really wonderful to work with. Scape has been fantastic as a landscape architect. Big is the actual architect. HR&A, we're working with, they're an economic firm. economic development firm. AKRF is leading remediation, Ty and Bond is leading transportation, and eDesign Dynamics is really leading all of the environmental ecological restoration piece of the design itself. And then we have a number of different supporting groups as well that are shown at the bottom. And so when we think about community engagement, as I said, the March 5th meeting already took place. That was at Brian McMahon School. I would love to personally welcome you all to participate in the May 8th meeting. The May 8th meeting is when we're going to get together to talk about programming for the building and programming for the landscape of the property, and being able to ask you what you would like to prioritize and what you think we should prioritize, and being able to think about all of this work. We've been thinking about introducing the park as a phased approach and being able to open up different pieces of the park at different times to be able to encourage the public to explore the park as we open the different phases and the different pieces. And that May 8th meeting will be able to take a lot of that feedback and be able to formulate it into that concept design that was in that timeline slide. The last meeting is going to take place in July. This meeting is actually, the date says July the 15th, which is a Tuesday. And what we were actually exploring was moving it up to Sunday, July the 13th, in order to be able to host a community event that's outside that is a little bit of a different feel than the Brian McMahon event. And so we'll be updating the community on whether it be July 13th or July 15th, but that meeting will be in July, And so if you can mark it on your calendar, that would be absolutely fantastic. I want to get into the history of the site. So, it's been a power plant for a long time, but before it was a power plant, this slide is really cool because it just shows the geological process in which and I like this slide because it actually shows the Norwalk Harbor as a whole, but with the glacial retreat, it basically left these islands almost as a moraine in the ocean and then the Long Island Sound. And as a result, we see the Norwalk Harbor as we know it today. But it supports this really unique and diverse ecology. And so, a lot of the work that we've been doing with Scape, the landscape architect, is being able to understand the different environments on the site and how we can enhance the health of them. And we're responsible for remediating the site. That responsibility transferred from Connecticut Light and Power over to NRG, over to Argent Ventures, and now to us as the owners of the site, Manresa Island Corp. And so it's our responsibility to remediate the site. And in part of that, it's the conversation about how to really ensure that the wildlife has the environment that it needs to be successful and thriving. And we know right now, as we go through the history of the site, we'll sort of show you why this is so important. But, Manresa has always been there in sort of older maps and different maps of the area showing indigenous that recognizes the salt people and being able to see that glacial till that was left over. And it's, had many different lives in many different ways. This map actually shows it as Kaiser Island. And so Kaiser Island John Kaiser was the owner of Kaiser Island, and it was used in the 1800s as a garden, as a vegetation site, and his personal garden where he grew a bunch of rare vegetation. And of course, we know that there was a bunch of oystering in the harbor. And so being able to support all of that. And then in 1911, the Jesuits actually bought the site. They bought Kaiser Island, and that's when it was named Manresa. It was named Manresa for a European city that is known as a meditation city. If you were to look at Manresa Island or Manresa Jesuit retreat, even today, you see different retreats around the country. And it was meant as a place of retreat and meditation, and just a really interesting background where all of these buildings started to be constructed on the actual island itself. At this time, it was an island. It was a 23-acre island that was connected to the mainland with a causeway. And so that's how that island piece came into the name. And then in the 1950s, the island went through this exercise where there was a referendum where the city of Norwalk residents voted to sell to have this power plant be on Manresa Island. And at that time, again, it was 23 acres. And there was a vote that was taken, and the Norwalk residents voted for the power plant to be in place. And that's when Connecticut Light and Power began to build out the power plant as we know it today. But the site looked very different. And so as you can see, these slides show the progression of how the land changed over time and how it went from being a 23-acre island that was connected by a causeway to a 125-acre site that we know Manresa to be today. And part of that story was that Manresa in the 1950s looked like this. It looked very, very different than what it looks like today. There were a number of different wetlands and a number of different areas of water on the site, lowlands on the site. And basically, when the plant opened in 1960, they would bring coal into the berth, and the coal would go along these conveyor belts to the building, and the building would burn the coal in order to be able to have the turbines create the power in order to be able to transform that power and be able to push it out through the substation. But as you can see in this picture, there was also an exercise of building, basically building barges or dikes in the water to be able to, and berms in the water to be able to create a barrier. And what they ended up doing was taking the coal ash that was burned in the plant during the 60s, and they ended up using conveyor belts to actually take that coal and fill in the lowlands and fill in the wetlands and fill in the water on the site, which is why the site is now 125 acres and looks a lot different than what it did before. And you can see here that this newly built dike and the historic marsh and all of this is not the way in which Manresa looks today. We know that Manresa has the oil tanks in basically in this place of where this picture is taken. And so today, obviously, the site looks much different. And we see this really interesting piece of land come together where there's an amazing salt marsh and this amazing birch forest. The interesting thing about the birch forest is that birch is very, very attracted to coal. And so basically where the coal was laid on the site is where this 90-acre birch forest emerged. And so the birch forest is something that Scape has been particularly interested in. It's almost a monoculture where the whole forest is birch. We've been talking about diversifying the forest and making sure that there's different species in the forest in order to be able to help the health of the forest and create sustainability there. It includes 3 oil tanks. These 3 oil tanks are empty and scrubbed, but each one of them would hold 7.5 million gallons of oil. And in the 60s, the plant burned coal, but in the 70s, it transferred and converted over to oil. And in the 70s is when these oil tanks were constructed. The plant ran until 2013, and it decommissioned in 2013 when energy rolled out the site. Originally, I thought that Sandy was the reason for the site to be closed, but what we've learned through paperwork is that energy actually applied to the federal government far before Sandy, notifying them of the decommissioning. And Sandy did happen as part of that process, but what I didn't realize is that they had notified the federal government in advance of that. And so what we have now is a building with the smokestack, the substation that Eversource owns, these 3 oil tanks, and this amazing birch forest and salt marsh, along with some of the other elements of the site, like the pier and the berth. And so the building itself is actually 3 separate buildings. We've been trying to, in the fall, we actually took a number of different people through the site to showcase the building and show the importance of the structure and why the structure is so important to the site. It's 3 separate buildings that are all connected. The smaller building is the administration building where all of the offices for energy were located. The turbine hall is a very large space, 100-foot ceilings, and just a 20,000 square foot floor space that is one large room that I have a picture of, and there's 2 turbines that are located in that building, and then a boiler hall that is about 200 feet tall. And the boiler hall, there's pictures of that we can look into, and then the smokestack that's 350 feet tall. This is a picture of the turbine hall, which is the 20,000 square foot room with the 100-foot ceilings. You can see one of the turbines in the picture here, and just a really significant space. And then this is a picture of the boiler hall. And the boiler building is really unique. It has this sort of graded floors with all of these staircases. It's very maze-like. But what's interesting about the boiler building is that it holds 2 boilers. The building was built in 2 phases, the left side and then the right side. And the 2 boilers that are in this building are really amazing. They are 8 stories tall, approximately 8 stories tall. And they're made of steel, and they just hang directly from the ceiling. So they don't attach to any of the floor plates, because during operation, they would expand and contract, and they could potentially peel off the floor plates. And so if you were to go on the tour, you would see at the very, very top of the building, they literally just hang with these steel girders from the ceiling, which is the strength of the building is pretty amazing. This is a picture of the cafeteria room in the administration hall. And then we have some pictures of the environment and of the landscape. This is a picture looking out. You can sort of see the pier in the background behind the tree on the left-hand side. This is a picture of the federally dredged berth, which is where the coal was delivered and where the oil was delivered. And of course, this is currently an area, an easement where the walk bridge is using the site for the walk bridge project, the building of the bridge spans. Here's a picture of the plant over the landscape, and then a picture of the birch forest, which again is about 90 acres. And this is a view from the rooftop of the plant looking out to Tavern Island and looking out into the direction of Manhattan, just showcasing the view. And this is a view of obviously Calf Pasture Beach and Cove and East Norwalk. So what are we looking at? So we're looking at, a new park for the city of Norwalk and a new park for the region. And the work that Scape has done has been really fantastic. We're so pleased. They've been really responsive to what is currently on the site and how the wildlife has evolved over the time period that the site has not been active. And so, as we know, it hasn't really been open to the public for about 75 years, and obviously hasn't been open at all since 2013. And so being able to understand the environments and the ecology that's happened on the site has been one of the things that they've been focused on. The number one thought on design is just the immersive waterfront aspect and being able to look at living coastline and understanding how Manresa's coast can actually be brought back to more of a natural state, and having the public have access to that. The second is thinking about all of the different environments that exist on Manresa in the 125-acre site, and thinking about the salt marsh and the birch forest and the different meadows and how all those pieces come together. And the third is being able to concentrate all the active programming on the southern tip of the site where the plant is actually located, and being able to leave the other areas more passive for folks to be able to enjoy. And so this is a rendering where, it's sort of what could be possible for the site and what could be possible for thinking about potential landscape. And this slide shows the salt marsh on the left-hand side of the road, and on the right-hand side, the birch forest. It also shows playground area of about 5 acres. It shows a terrace lawn between the promenade that was shown earlier and the building itself, along with a scrub scramble, which is a trail area that connects the beach to the building, and just thinking about how to utilize the site and be able to enhance some of the natural elements that are there, especially on more of the northern side of the site. And so if we look at this rendering, it shows just a little bit more of a colorful rendering of what that looks like. And again, this is what could be possible for the site. And this is part of the May 8th meeting, which is, what would people like to see on the site and how would they like to see these things incorporated? Right now, obviously, you see the beach, the scrub scramble, a terrace lawn, the promenade, a playground, all of these really unique elements that the site is able to handle and facilitate in a meaningful way. And so the other thing that's really great about this particular plan is that it actually shows the road that you would take into Manresa. It shows it as orange and a little bit gray. That's the existing road, but right now it parcelizes two wetlands. And so one of the wetlands is a tidal wetland and the other wetland is a dry wetland. And the water doesn't flow underneath the road that was created for access for the power plant as we know it today. And so this plan actually raises that road. It creates a 2.5 kilometer walking trail around the site. And relocates the road to a little bit more of the center of the site that where we can elevate it for flood compliance. But this allows for a trail system and it allows for biking and walking on the site, but it also allows for a much healthier wetland. So those five values and those five visions that I had mentioned earlier. So a place like no other, 125-acre waterfront park with almost 2 miles of coastline that just allow people an opportunity to be able to connect with the water. An island for all, which is that, people of all ages and backgrounds are welcome to be able to experience this, to be able to have exposure to the water, be able to watch the sunrise, be able to understand the different tidal cycles and be able to experience what a site like this would look like. And a hub for learning and discovery. So thinking about how we can create a network of public spaces and thinking about year-round experiences that being able to keep the building will support, right? So we can imagine how cold, not on days like today, but you can imagine in February and March how cold Manresa is with the wind kind of whipping up and blowing your hat off and kind of blowing your mittens off. And but the building allows us to be able to activate the site year round, and it also allows us to be able to connect the people with the water in more of a meaningful way, even during the cold weather when the site may not be as welcoming if the building wasn't there. And then this revitalized ecology, which is that, we have all these ecosystems in this post-industrial world and site that basically are need to be remediated, and they are coal ash to a very large extent. And so thinking about how to create a site that is safe and welcoming to the public, but also safe for animals and safe for the wildlife that are currently using the site, and being welcoming to those species and being able to give them a clean place to be able to live. And then a model of future thinking, which is how are we thinking about integrated systems of technology, specifically for sustainability and resiliency, thinking about how to explore innovative ways to remediate a site that looks like this. And an example is how do you remediate different wetlands, freshwater wetlands, tidal wetlands, dry wetlands, along with being able to establish a remediation approach that will allow that birch forest, that 90-acre birch forest, to be able to be sustainable, right? We don't want to hurt the forest in any way. We just want to be able to make it clean so that people and the wildlife can be able to use it. And so again, just coming back to this image of all of the different elements that are included in the park. We've been working hard to be able to meet with all our local partners. We've been meeting with the Norwalk Transit District and the Sono Collection, and we've been meeting with the Seaport Association to learn about how to really activate the site in different ways and be able to bring the people to the site in ways that include, over the water. So thinking about the Seaport Association and the ferry stop, being able to think about Sono Collection for parking, and the Norwalk Transit District for being able to think about a shuttle. And so just different ways to be able to work with local partners to be able to think of how a site like this could be built out. And again, this is something for the public to know what's possible for a site like this and be able to provide us with that feedback and prioritization on May the 8th. And this is a rendering for the admin building and the boiler building and the turbine building. And it just showcases sort of this activation at the local level of potential swimming pools inside the building with a more of a lap pool on the outside, and how the building may potentially fit in with this terrace lawn that would go all the way down to the promenade. A lot of people ask about the substation, which is that sort of gray brown area in beyond the turbine hall and the admin building. That's actually owned by Eversource and will continue to be owned by Eversource. It's a substation that actually is the hub between New York and New England. And so it's still very much activated, and Eversource is on the site. And so that portion will stay, which is why you see it, that you see it in the renderings that are shown. This is an activation of the turbine hall, and it shows just a community event as an example of something that could be happening. I think this is like a school fair or something like that, where there's potentially a concert in the building on a Saturday or a Sunday, and families are getting together with maybe a bake sale on the far wall. You can see here, that's not what the turbine looks like. This is actually an example of the turbine being cut in half with a glass wall along the face of it so that you can actually see the inside of the turbine. And then you can see some activation on the second level, which is almost an overlook of the main floor. And this is just a little bit of a close-up of the scrub scramble and the beach area, which is the connectivity between the building and the beach. And this is an example of what could potentially be possible for an aquatic center. And so thinking about splash pads and swimming pools and areas for different people to be able to use. Obviously, the area inside the building could be used year round. You can see sort of these like sliding doors that go back and forth depending on the weather. And then this lap pool that's outside that could be used for swim lessons or used for different activation. This is a rendering of the federally dredged berth. It has about a 20-foot draft right now. And so what you see here is activation for the site as a living classroom and a living laboratory, and being able to support different partners and being able to come to the site and collect data and be able to think about different innovative ways to do sustainability and resiliency for the site, but also monitoring remediation and monitoring how different pieces and phases of the project are implemented, and how we can use those as a best practice case for all of those other sites that are on that map that we saw. This is a picture of the promenade, which you've seen earlier. And this area is a picture of a white cedar swamp. It's actually in the birch forest. And right now, this whole area is Phragmite. And so the plan would be to remove Phragmite and introduce a white cedar swamp. And the white cedar swamp is important for a couple of reasons. One, it is native to the area. It's very susceptible to non-native invasives that tend to push it out. And so it's very rare in New England. And it also offers a freshwater resource a freshwater source, I should say, to all of the wildlife on the site, which is also really important. And in addition, we'd be getting rid of the Phragmite, which of course is an invasive species, and being able to open this back up to the wildlife. This is a picture of a trail. It's the 2.5-kilometer trail that I mentioned was on the site. This is a piece that's actually over by just beyond the federal berth, which activation. And you can see just on the left-hand side, there's people that are in sort of this tidal pool area where families would have the ability to sort of go in and discover different horseshoe crab. And as the tide comes in, play in the water. And as the tide go out, do some exploratory fun afternoon time. And then this is a picture of the salt marsh. And you saw a close-up rendering of that, which is here. And so, there are lots of different pieces on this rendering. And again, it's really meant to be able to showcase what is possible on the site, and to think about and to give offerings to the public to gain feedback and be able to get learn what is important to people and what they would like to see and how they would like the site to be prioritized, so that we have this ability to be able to go into that concept design phase, which was shown earlier on the slide, and be able to understand what is possible and how the site could be phased out over time. And so what's happening in 2025? Well, we are focused on early remediation, which is actually removing the oil tanks. We've released a bid for a contract company to be able to come in and remove those tanks, and we expect that work to start at the end of May, with the oil tanks being removed by the summer, by the fall, the beginning of the fall. And so that's a really big piece. Those 3 tanks that hold 7.5 million gallons of oil each. And so that'll be a big contribution. I think as you look out on the site from East Norwalk, there won't be those 3 big oil tanks anymore. Or as you look out from Calf Pasture Beach, you won't see those anymore. The second is the walk bridge construction still continues. And as I mentioned, they're actually building the spans for the walk bridge on the Manresa Island property. And the plan is to float those spans up the Norwalk Harbor from the site and be able to install them with a crane. The third thing is site data collection. And so the data collection relates a lot to remediation and the construction plans as we move forward. And so understanding the geotech side of the house, being able to survey the property, understanding the different remediation types that can be used across the different environments, and how to implement and use remediation approaches that do not harm what is already there, like the forest, for example, like I mentioned. We're continuing site tours. There will be days in May and also days in June that we'll be hosting those tours. And continued partnership development. And that's part of me talking about the Seaport Association and the Norwalk Transit District, and thinking about Sono Collection and even the Norwalk Art Space. We've been meeting with the Norwalk Land Trust, and we've been meeting with different organizations that are water-based organizations, Save the Sound, and different harbor-focused health groups. And so being able to think about how to build those partnerships is really important. And of course, the Maritime Aquarium as well. And so how can you get involved? As I mentioned, I keep plugging this May 8th meeting. We're going to be meeting again between 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock at the Brian McMahon High School. It's a really important meeting, and I really encourage everyone to participate. It is going to be a presentation that actually includes a focus on the building. And then it's going to be an open house with different tables that are interactive that allow you to weigh in on things that look like, weigh in on prioritizing different elements of the project. So if you really like the aquatic element, then you can weigh in on that. If you don't like other pieces, then you have the ability to give us that feedback. Thinking about some of the concerns that have popped up in the previous meeting on the March 5th meeting, and being able to gain feedback at a different level at the May 8th meeting. And so there will be a presentation, but to a large extent, the majority of the meeting will actually be in an open house format. We will have Scape and Big. We will have HRNA, Tie and Bond, eDesign, and others at the meeting. And so you have the ability to meet with different consultants that are working with the group and working on the project, and have different thoughts and different information about the site. In particular, it's interesting to learn about the sustainability and resiliency approaches, and also learn about the ecology on the site. And so all of our team will be there to talk with you and in this open house style. And then this community celebration, which, as I mentioned, will be based on July the 13th in an outdoor event that we will announce more of the details with later. The other way to get involved is to sign up for a tour. there's a link here, and being able to go and see the site for yourself is really important. We take people through the site up to the roof so that you can see Long Island Sound from there. And also, if time allows, we can go on a UTV around the site and you can see the birch forest and the salt marsh, and even go all the way up to the waterfront to be able to see the pier. Another way to get involved is to sign up for volunteering. We've had a lot of people offer their support and offer time and effort to being able to make this park become a reality. And so we've created a volunteer form that says, what would you like to do and how would you like to help and how can we work together in order to be able to get you involved? And so being able to have people submit their information there and let us know how they want to help has been really great. And it's really great to see all of the support. And then you're more than welcome to send an email at any time to admin@manresaislandpark.org. That's also a possible way to get involved and just be able to share your thoughts and your feedback, and also give us ideas about what you're thinking about. And so, Dan, I'm going to wrap it up there. Just gone through a number of different slides, but happy to take questions and answers.
Okay, thank you so much, Jessica. That was a good comprehensive review. I know that you cut it back, in interest of time, but I think we covered a lot of stuff there. So what we want to do is go ahead and get things open for the public. I did have, there's kind of three things. I don't want to put you on the spot, Jess, but there are, and I'm sure that you've heard about this before, but there's several, for lack of a better term, there's some elephants in the room surrounding how this thing got started and kind of the phase that it's at now. And I just wanted to address those in general, so that the public's aware and we can answer those questions and get them out of the way, and people can talk to you specifically about their feedback. One is, so the involvement with this through the city of Norwalk, was this part of the, are there zoning regulations that allow for this? And were you a part of this when you were still the chief of economic development and community development, in terms of working with even having this possibly permitted?
No, actually. So I was the chief of economic and community development at the city when Allison and Austin did purchase the site, but never a part of entitlement questions or never a part of zoning questions. Manresa Island was actually peeled off and left alone along with Norden Place, as you folks know, through the zoning rewrite. And, the park isn't, the zoning for Manresa Island does not allow for what you see here. It does not support this. And so we will have to go through the entitlement process. There's been no applications submitted to planning and zoning. There's been no meetings with planning and zoning. And part of the reason for that is that there's actually not a design that's locked in. As you can see, there's ideas of what is possible for the site and what is possible for the building. But we're not even in a place where we've completed community engagement, and we're not in a place where we have a final design for, in the sense that we have a final cost estimate or even the ability to go into planning and zoning with an application, because we have yet to decide what programming will actually be in place.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Because I think that there was some misinterpretation that this might not even come back in to go through the permitting process, which was, and took us to the second question, which was, folks who have been trying to do a little bit of due diligence on their own also have noticed that there's information that's lacking at the state level. We couldn't find, or other folks couldn't find, any information registered with the DEEP in terms of your collaboration with them, and also the DOT for things like major traffic generators. Is that only because those steps are premature but they're planned in the future, or are those steps underway but we just don't see it?
So we have met with DEEP, but we have yet to pull permits from DEEP, and we have yet to, we've just been going through a stewardship permit process with them, and only actually just submitted paperwork, I believe, last week. So that has all been that has all been happening over the last couple of months, but nothing to report. And as a matter of fact, the application went in last week, but they have yet to approve it. And we have yet to meet with them in order to be able to go through the deep pieces. As you know, we need to go through an NDDB during the summer, which is actually an inventory of all of the wildlife on the site and all of the wildlife on the site, as well as all of the plant vegetation on the site. And that is required before we're able to pull any permits for remediation in order to be able to clean the site. And so there's a lot of pieces that need to happen that we're working closely with Deep on, but it's a little bit of a marathon, not a sprint. And so the NDDB will probably take the summer months. That's what Deep has been telling us. And then only after that are we able to go in and think about additional permits. From the DOT side, we don't have programming solidified yet, right? And so because there's no programming solidified, we have yet to meet with DOT specifically on the transportation pieces. We've been meeting, of course, with the Seaport Association and meeting with different folks that are water users and being able to understand how to support that, and meeting with the transit district, as I mentioned, for a streamlined and shuttle system or ability to be able to connect with the Sono train station and the ability to connect with the Sono collection for parking. But again, the DOT conversation has yet to happen. It's been focused on the easement and focused on sort of the timing of the easement and what that entails. But again, I just want to reiterate that the zoning on this site does not support what you see. And so it will go through the entitlement process. And again, there's no, I just want to be super clear about that. Has been no application that has been submitted, but in addition, we can't submit an application when we don't have the community engagement completed yet, because we don't have a final design in place to be able to ask for or go through the entitlement process for zoning itself. And so all of that is yet to come, but we don't really picture that happening until really the fall or the winter.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And for the benefit of the public, much of what Jessica was just speaking about with permitting at different intervals, there'll be some requirements that will, some of those steps in the permitting will require public hearings. And locally and possibly Deep, et cetera. The NDDB that she's speaking about will talk to the existing wildlife and plant life, kind of flora and fauna. And I know that part of that evaluation has to do with identifying at-risk and endangered species as well. So there'll be a rigorous, we hope a rigorous review of that. All right, so what we'd like to do, I think, Jessica, you tell me how you feel about this. I'm kind of thinking, can we just leave your presentation up so that if people have questions that you need to hop back to?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go to our volunteer, Charles. And generally what we like to do is hop back and forth between people who have their hand raised and questions that have come in over chat. We do ask, if you're not a resident of 06855, we'll get to you, but we want to allow first the residents here to jump in. So, Charles, do we have any hands up? Because I can never see them.
There are no hands up at the moment, but there are two things in chat. The first one was, will the park be open to all of Norwalk, all of Connecticut, or anyone that drives in? And it goes on to say, if it's open to non-Norwalk residents, will Norwalk residents get prioritized for limited parking? She cited Calf Pasture Beach when it gets, to capacity and people get turned away.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Yeah. So the idea for this park is that one of the value statements is that it's open for all. And so it's open for the city of Norwalk, but also the region as a whole. We have a lot of operational conversations to go through that will look at how we'll handle parking and how we'll handle having different people access the site. As you know, because I've mentioned it a couple times, thinking about how to utilize different parking assets around the city, I think is going to be really important. And also how to bring people across on the water is going to be very important as well. And so as we finalize design for the building and the landscape, we'll have a much better sense of what parking is required and sort of how we think about parking. But there's also that operational question as well. But the plan for the park is to be open to the public as a whole. Oh, I think you just muted, but I think I can probably look at the, I think I can look at the, so here I can read the question. So the first one question is, yeah, that's okay, is Eversource's substation going to remain or go away? So that's going to stay in place. As I'd mentioned, the Eversource actually owns that substation, and it's the connection between New York and New England. And so that will stay, and we will have to use some vegetation to be able to sort of hide that or cover it to a certain extent. And so as we finalize design, we'll figure that out a little bit more. And I see Christina's question, and then I see Becca. You mentioned that the first meeting was slated to take place at the aquarium and got moved to Brian McMahon High School. Is there a reason? I asked because folks have relayed to me that Brian McMahon is much more difficult to access by walking, biking, or the Norwalk Transit District bus compared to a location in central Sono, especially at the time of day, which might prohibit some Norwalk residents from attending. So originally we planned to have it at the Maritime Aquarium because we were imagining a different capacity. And so the capacity for the aquarium would allow for approximately 300 people. And the Brian McMahon High School had an auditorium of 875 seats, and we had 719 people RSVP. And so after we saw the RSVPs get to 500 and 600 people, we decided to move it from the Maritime Aquarium to Brian McMahon High School in order to be able to allow for enough capacity from even a fire code standpoint in order to be able to actually allow for the public to hear the presentation and then also make their way over to the gymnasium to be able to talk with our different consultants and our different team members about the project itself. And so originally we thought that the Maritime Aquarium was a great official partner of the project, and of course we love the aquarium, and they were super great to work with. But when we saw those numbers start to get above 500, we knew that we needed to find a location that actually met the fire code for the group of people that we were expecting.
Jess, I'll jump in with one too. Just a quick question on here. Ultimately, would this park become something that is the city of Norwalk, or would it always be Manresa Island Corp in the park? And this doesn't seem to be something that's viable in the absence of it being regional and even more than just regional. So, do you have any stats on what it would take to support something like this in terms of attendance and events that are booked and the use of the venues?
Yeah, so I think we don't have that, Diane, because it's just we haven't fully programmed and baked the site yet, and basically because we're in community engagement, getting all of that information right. And I think that after the May meeting and after the July meeting, we'll have a lot better sense of what will be on the site and what could potentially be included in the building moving forward. And then also there's going to have to be an understanding of sort of what's phased, like what's open on day one versus open in year 1, year 2, year 3, and sort of thinking about what the evolution of this park looks like. Of all of the parks that I've been to in preparation to work on this park, with my work with the McCords, has been that the park has evolved over time, right? And so the McCords' goal is to be able to have the public access this site as soon as possible in a meaningful way. And so thinking about that means that, you know, it's not as though the ribbon will be cut and all 125 acres will be accessible with the building all at one time. It's going to be a phased approach, and thinking about sort of what that will look like over time is going to be really important as well. And being able to set expectations for the community and understanding what portion work is open and when. Just an example of that, the Department of Transportation easement, which is really existing, excuse me, where this green sort of terrace lawn is on this image, their easement is in place until 2032. And so thinking about that timeline and sort of being able to think about how to have the public access this site in certain ways over time is really important, in knowing that there's a portion of the site which includes this big long pier that really won't be available for, you know, the near future itself. And so I want to, you know, be clear that one, the design for the landscape and the building is not completed yet. And so that will drive a lot of the conversation about parking and a lot of the conversation about what that maintenance looks like. But the park is in no way, shape, or form planned to be gifted to the city or planned to be gifted to the state or any other government entity. And so we've been thinking a lot about the endowment and thinking about how the park will be maintained over time. And so that's something that is something that's at the forefront of all of our minds, and thinking about how to do that in an amazing way and how to do that in a way that is really sustainable. The Dave and Lisa Roger asked, does open to all also mean that there's no charge? And so all of the green that you see, the beach and all of the green that you see in the playground will have no charge to it. And so we assume that there will be a parking charge, and we assume that if there's activation in the building, that may also have a charge. But again, because the design is not completed, we don't really know what all of those elements will include, and therefore don't know what the pricing will be. But as far as coming on site biking or walking or taking a boat in, you know, you'll be able to access all of this green area, whether it be the White Cedar Swamp and the Birch Forest or the playground and the terrace lawn. All of that will be at no cost.
Okay, do we have some other folks, or are there folks outside of 06855 that have comments and suggestions or questions? We'll wait for see if any hands go up. While we're doing that, I'll ask Jess too. Jess, have you heard, ENNA has heard from several people whose primary goal would actually, or, you know, what they'd like to see for this property is to see it completely preserved with no activity, would be only passive activity and things that are related to the preservation of the wildlife and the natural, you know, kind of what would exist there naturally, or to restore what should have been there. Are you hearing from these folks as well in terms of the feedback that you've solicited at the, either online through the surveys or through emails or at the Brian McMahon first session?
Yeah, so we're hearing, you know, I think the majority of what we're hearing is a big supportive thank you to the McCords for buying the property and committing to remediate the property. There are some talks of the Manresa Island Neighborhood Association and the report that they did with the city of Norwalk back actually before I ever started with the city. I think they completed in 2017 or 2018, talking about passive uses and solar, talking about a marina, talking about a research facility like the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. And so you know, we've been reminded of that study and thinking about all of those different uses. I think to a large extent, you know, I think the community is really grateful for knowing that a private developer won't be coming in and kind of raising the site for housing and for residential development. And so I think there's a lot of support there for the park in the sense of understanding what the alternatives may be and what the zoning could potentially support, which includes a residential component. I also think that there's a lot of people that are providing us with feedback that is thinking about how the wildlife uses this site and, you know, the ability to think about the wildlife using it in the future. You know, again, we're legally responsible for remediating the site, and that's a big part of the work that's going on here. I think that's partly why the site has sat like every other site in New England for so long, where it's sort of like, where would you ever be able to find the resources or be able to think that somebody would make a philanthropic gift to a community in order to be able to actually remediate a 125-acre piece of land. And so we have been getting comments like that, but more than anything, we've been getting comments that are just really supportive of the McCord's philanthropic gift to the community and thinking about how to incorporate the community in a process like this that allows for, thinking about active and passive land. There is been conversation about, why we want to keep the building and what that brings. And I mentioned a couple of things. One is sort of the ability to activate the site for 4 seasons round and be able to connect the public with that and be able to offer the community different uses within the building. And it actually acts as an operating revenue generator as well to be able to take care of the park and be able to keep the park in really great place moving forward as well. And so thinking about the importance of that, it also keeping the building, believe it or not, actually reduces our carbon footprint by over 70%. And it also means that we don't need construction equipment in there, taking out the pilings and putting pilings in for new structures, right? And so thinking about how to be a good neighbor and not disrupting the neighboring communities and being able to bring all of that steel out, through the community and thinking about how to really incorporate those pieces and those structures into the site have been really important as well. So, I'm not going to say that we haven't heard that because we absolutely have, Diane. We've 100% heard that from different people, from a number of people, but overall, it's just been super supportive and people are really touched by the generosity of the McCords and being able to think that people can access a site like this when they may not have access to the water currently.
True. Yeah. Yeah. We always want to double check because sometimes, folks are communicating with us or other organizations, and then we find out it's not actually getting to you. And, we encourage people to, they can copy us, for sure to keep us in the loop, but we encourage them to reach out. And what I will be doing too is making sure in our next newsletter that we have all of those contact points for you and relative to the survey and the email and the and also the upcoming session as well. Okay, yeah. Is there anyone online who has their hand up, or we have anything more in chat?
No, not at the moment, but I had a question. You mentioned volunteering opportunities. Can you elaborate on some of the help that would be needed?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been talking about, before the site opens to the public, we've been talking about thinking about how to do different gardening efforts and initiative, not only like at the gateway of Manresa, but around the city. We've also been thinking about how to do neighborhood cleanups and thinking about coastal community cleanups and how Manresa can support that as well. For when the site opens, we have a whole opportunity of being able to think about volunteers to be able to help us with the landscape and thinking about how the Board of Education can arrive in on the site with different students and have them be learning about not only the ecology, but also the architecture of the building and post-industrial buildings and sites like this. We also have the ability to have volunteers help us with different kiosks, whether it be kayaking and paddleboarding, or whether it be down at the beach and handing out different life jackets to folks. And so there's a huge realm of volunteer possibilities. There's a lot of things that we probably haven't even thought of as far as volunteering goes. And so that form allows people to say that they want to help with helping to develop the site or being able to help do a bunch of work on the site pre-opening or during the opening. But it also has an area where it's open format, where basically you have the ability to make a recommendation on how you think you can volunteer and what you think, giving ideas for recommendations. And so, it's been really great to read through some of the different comments and read through the different public feedback on how people are interested in getting involved. And we really started it because everyone we're talking to and a lot of people that are touring the site are asking how they can get involved and how they can support the effort. And so we wanted to be able to post that now in order to be able to say, like, we really want you to help us. And we're on this journey to be able to create a really great park. And it's going to be opening in all these different phases, and sort of like, how do you want to help and what's your skill set and how can we include you in this process? And so again, Charles, there's a number of different ideas on the site, but there's also an open text box for people who want to help volunteer in a different way.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Hey, Jessica, you may have mentioned it, I'm sorry if I missed it, but is this, to the best of your knowledge now, is this going to be exclusively accessed through land and then water, or is there any plan for anything like helicopters or anything air related? And
yeah, so nothing air related, Diane. No, just so we have the road in, and we have the road in, and of course we've been talking with the different transit district to be able to think about some of that, the comprehensive operational analysis that they're going through, and thinking about the new bus routes that they're talking about, and how those bus routes might be able to access Manresa, and how we might be able to help out with being able to be a bus turnaround and sort of bring people into the site. And also the potential shuttle that we can be talking about. And then again, really focused on bringing people over the water, whether that be water taxi or the Sheffield ferry as a potential extra stop. And thinking about how to support the use of the pier and folks getting to us by water, which is a big piece, but no air. We haven't been talking about helicopters or anything of that sort.
is it, if this thing were full blown, if everything that we saw in the proposal were to come to fruition someday, where everything is activated, is it the type of thing that folks would come in, would be like a 1-day trip? Would you call it a day trip for someone, or would it really take, multiple visits to experience everything?
I think it depends on what the user wants, right? And so it's 125 acres. And so, for example, the terrace lawn is 5 acres and the playground is 5 acres and the birch forest is 90 acres. And so I think it depends on what you're seeking as a user. I think for different parks that look like this, we've seen different configurations. So the majority of the visitors, like 80% or higher, are usually day visitors where they just come in for a walk, or they come in to walk the beach. They come in to be able to play at the playground or be able to access the building. And then you end up with about 10% of folks that are basically 10% of folks that might be between a, let's say, like 30-mile to 60-mile range, and then a smaller percentage from 60 miles to 100 miles, and then maybe just a small percentage of folks that are coming in from a larger distance where they may actually come in on a Friday and stay into a Sunday. And so that just depends on the user and what the user is experiencing and what they would like to do. But it'd be really great to be able to partner with the Sheffield Island folks and the Maritime Aquarium and Stepping Stones and the Matthews Mansion and all the Sono Collection and all of those different pieces of Norwalk and those different organizations in Norwalk that all are attracting people in order to be able to allow for these really great synergies to work, where they're not just coming to Manresa, but they're actually, eating in our restaurants and staying in different hotels and being able to kind of experience the city over time. And so how using this site in order to be able to prop up our nonprofit organizations like the Art Space and different groups is important to me. I think it's not specifically one of our visions, but it speaks to the visions that we have in place, where we want it to be an island for all and be welcoming to everyone and have them be able to experience the region as a whole.
Gotcha. And then for the island itself, there's no portion of the building space that's meant to be accommodations. There's no hotel or anything where, overnight accommodations on the island, correct?
It could potentially, the building itself is actually could potentially be up to 250,000 square feet when it's completed. Mm-hmm. And there could be an active space where there is an overnight stay that might be in place to be able to support a special event space. It may actually be in place to support the students and academic research that goes on site as well. And so I think that the conversation allows for that as a potential element to be considered. And I think that, it's one of the things that we'd be looking for on May 8th to be able to talk about how that feels to people, if that makes sense, where people come in on a Friday and they leave on a Sunday, and therefore maybe some of the traffic is brought in and sort of people stay for the weekend, or if there is an event that happens on site, that people have the ability to potentially stay over if they choose to. And so, we'll be seeking feedback on that particular portion, but I do think that it's, with that much space and the way in which it's configured, an element like that is possible.
Thank you. Okay, Charles, if there's anybody else?
There is one more. Christina was asking if there'll be picnic tables and outdoor grills.
Mm-hmm. So the picnic table piece, yes. We haven't spoken specifically about grills, so that's something that I'll bring up to the design team and ask them specifically. But we've been talking a lot about different spaces that you have the ability to sort of sit and eat lunch, and that you can hang out, whether that be in the birch forest, whether you're just relaxing amongst the trees, or over by the terrace lawn where potentially there could be an activity going on. And so I do picture picnic tables on the site, but I will ask specifically about the grills.
And there would be food service available there as well, though, right? In the space.
Yeah. So you saw the rendering of the promenade with the food trucks, right. And you also saw
with the trucks.
And you saw and there are different pieces too that we would explore that we could explore in the building, as well as food and beverage as well. Because I think also, Diane, that helps support it helps support the site, and also gives people on the site an option to be able to have lunch and stay on site. But in addition, that would be a driver of potential operational revenue for us to be able to sustain the park as well. Right. So the question is, will there be specific open close times? So we've been talking about specific open and close times. I don't have the specificity around that as of yet. Some of the concerns that we've heard is about noise pollution and light pollution and sort of different events that will go on in the site. And so we are sensitive to being, again, good neighbors and understanding what that operational side of the house will look like. And so we are planning to have open close times, but I don't have the specific hours at this time. I think that will depend on programming and being able to understand how the park is utilized with the different elements that are on the site. I'm also happy to answer questions through that admin@manresaislandpark.org as well. And so if there's anyone who wants to follow up with questions, that would be great too. And this project is really exciting. Of course, I learned about it first and foremost when I was with the city as the chief of economic and community development. But at that time, we had been talking with we've been talking for so many years, 6 years, about NRG and the plan for NRG. And, it was really interesting because the city had really thought that Argent Ventures had purchased the site, and along with you folks had seen the application be submitted, and knowing that Allison and Austin now, and understanding that Allison and Austin were working with them in behind the scenes to be able to purchase the site was just a real, really great, point of information, and thinking about what is possible for a site like this, and the generosity in which they're putting forward in order to be able to talk with the community and understand and prioritize different pieces, I think is really, oh, did I lose you? Are you still there?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I see. You just took me off. Okay, great.
Yeah, I just took the screen down so we can talk with you.
Sure. Is the generosity in being able to commit philanthropic dollars like this to be able to remediate the parcel in order to be able to have the community take part in that is really important. Mm-hmm. I think we have a long road ahead of us, right? So we have not submitted applications to the city for any particular piece. We have obviously talked to them about the oil tanks and removing the oil tanks, but have yet to go to P&Z and have yet to address some of the different, discussions with different community organizations in the sense of the city itself. And we're working through those deep permits. And again, just submitted last week, which is probably why you didn't see anything, Diane. If you had looked previous to this meeting, they have yet to probably process the application. We actually mailed in the paper. We mailed in the paper just a week or so ago to be able to start that process. And so it's been, it will be it's going to be over time that we work together with the community in order to be able to build this park out. And we really look forward to the May 8th meeting, and we look forward to the July meeting in order to be able to get the feedback from the community to be able to advance to next steps. And I feel like, in the next conversations that we have, after we have the ability to weigh in all of that community engagement, we'll have different answers on, potential opening and closing, or thinking about more solidified partnerships in order to be able to bring people to the site, and so on and so forth. And so hopefully, the next time we talk, those answers will be more solidified.
Great. Thank you, Jess. I think this was very helpful. I think for the folks who were on here now, they have the preview prior to the May 8th session for the folks who didn't go. So I think this was helpful. It'll give them some time to kind of digest what you showed to us, and maybe formulate some opinions and suggestions before they get there. And we do appreciate you taking the time. We know your schedule must be insane right now with all of this going on. And we do appreciate you hopping on here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate everyone taking the time. I know I took your full time, and I really appreciate everyone's questions and learning about the site. It's a really exciting time to be able to think of a decommissioned power plant that's been sitting there for 75 years, completely untouched, with the ability to have the public go on it and be able to have the access. And so, but more than anything, thanks for taking the time, because I know everybody else has really busy schedules too. And so being able to learn about the project and hopefully attending on May the 8th, we just really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a really great night.
Thanks. All right, we're going to go ahead. Thanks, Jessica. We're going to go ahead and
You're welcome.
We did have some other things on our agenda. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and see if anyone is on. Okay, so while there are folks on here and don't feel like you have to stay on, but before we cut off the recording, I just want to say that, of course, ENNA is following closely the Norton Place application, what's called a car club land use. The applicant is the Auto Collective. We have begun raising a number of concerns and questions to clarify the exact use of this property. Some of the questions and clarifications we've sent into planning and zoning, they will be submitting those to the applicants and the applicant's attorney. We hope to hear back very soon on those, because we don't want to be on top of a public hearing and still not have the questions addressed. We did see, some of you may have seen in the Norwalk Hour, an article about this application, and it kind of raised our radar a little bit, because the owner who's looking to open this up actually started speaking in terms of community events. And of course, we're concerned with that, because our original permitting paperwork and application indicated that it would only be member-sponsored events for within their own groups and their own, for example, maybe a family event for a member. But community events takes on kind of a whole different meaning. And I'll say it for the benefit, because we are recorded, of all the possible existing land uses that still could be used in Norton, this is probably one of the least impactful and the least objectionable to ENNA and the community. Our concern is that the more we learn about this, the more it's starting to look more like an event venue that happens to be a car storage place for enthusiasts to have some of their activities, than what the actual application looks like, which is, a car club that happens to have some activities. So we're continuing to investigate this. We'll be putting more information out, and of course, we'll have a position statement for the public hearing. There were some other interesting things today on the rumor mill, but ENNA doesn't deal in rumors. But if you've heard any rumors that were new today, we're tracking them down. We're doing a little fact checking, and we'll let folks know about that. This was just a little bit more on the car club. If you have any questions on that, you can raise your hands and address this. Let me just get beyond it. I think I have. Okay, just wanted to remind folks that the actual application did come in for the former Jimmy's Deli site. It's a combination of the two parcels of 65 Van Zandt Street and 28 Rowan Street. And for right now, the only action taken by the zoning commission is the requirement for, because of the zone that it's in, the EVTZ zone, this requires a architectural, a review by a third party architect to do a peer review of this architecture and compliance with zoning regulation, and the whether or not the proposed public amenity bonus points actually are commensurate with the size and the number of units in this building. So there has not been a preliminary review. As of today, to the best of my knowledge, this is not on yet on a zoning commission agenda, but the authorization was given to go ahead and hire or commission the third party review. And I believe that the applicant has to pay for that review. That's not at the city expense. Just to remind you, this is 49 Van Zandt. Shortly after we did the formal blight complaints is when the notice of demolition, the intent to demolish, came in. And so we're also expecting zoning applications to come in for that. This parcel is also within the EVTZ zone, the East Avenue Village Transit Zone. And so it could be potentially eligible for special permit that would increase density and height. Okay, that was it for us. If there was another application or anything going on in East Norwalk that you have a question on that we can address,
there was a question about Jimmy's
Yep.
Deli. Was there any mention of the amount of parking spaces they would include?
Yep. So the parking spaces that they would include would actually meet the minimum requirements. It may actually go over, but there's 22 units, and then the formula for the parking, I think, is at the 22. And actually, I may have that back on that screen there. I don't know if I had that. I don't think I had that one posted there. No, I didn't. But I can tell when we actually looked at the original parking requirements there, even though it meets the technical zoning parking requirements, it's still likely to be inadequate because of visitors, because of deliveries. Especially, any kind of special event going on where someone might have somebody there. So there could be overflow parking from there as well. The traffic report, of course, came back as no significant impact. The way that they measure that is, based on the number of cars that would be exiting from the rear and the front, and whether it would have an impact at an existing traffic light or a stop sign. We actually would have to hire a traffic expert to be able to confirm or question what their traffic expert came up with. ENNA's concern so far is that we don't want any kind of bottlenecking coming out of this building on either road, because it happens to sit fairly close to the stop signs. The one at Sweet Ashley's on Van Zandt, and also the one that's just right next to it at the church on Rowan. And so people, turning in and out, that can create, a real headache in terms of, especially at peak hours. Okay. And again, I'm sorry, Charles, because I don't have my screen right. Are there any hands up or anything in chat?
Yeah, there was another question about the rendering of Jimmy's Deli and how it would be helpful to have a realistic rendering of the building sandwiched between the neighboring buildings and the church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's definitely something that we can ask for. It would be part when they actually go before planning and zoning. They will have to have all of that. The those renderings where you see this relative to the parcel, they're actually on the city website right now. If you go to pending applications on planning and zoning site, so you can flip through and you can actually see the civil engineering report and the site plan, and you can see the setbacks at the property line. I don't have to tell folks who live here, you see One Cemetery Street and other developments, there's virtually no setbacks at this point. I don't happen to have the screen up right now, but if you go onto the city's P&Z website and click on pending applications and then click on 65 Van Zant, you can actually scroll through the actual site plans, and you can see the proximity there, and also get a better idea of the a little bit better idea of the height. But one of the things that happens too with these applications is when they do their presentation to P&Z, when they first show this parcel, they tend to do an overhead that is really, zoomed out far away so that it looks like a tiny little parcel. What they don't do is they show, not to show the parcel, just how big this is relative to being close to the properties on either side of it. And it also doesn't do a really good rendition of showing the height. This one wouldn't qualify for us really asking for a 3D rendition, for a 3D model to be done. We did think that it would be absolutely necessary for Cemetery Street, but the Planning and Zoning Commission overruled us and did not require them to do that. Unfortunately, I think, for most of us, we're very visual and dimensional. And I think the broader community would have had a much better understanding of exactly what Cemetery Street was going to end up looking like if the Planning and Zoning Commission had ruled in our favor to require the 3D modeling. Anything else in chat or with
Yeah. Becca brought up that the parking wouldn't be inadequate if people did follow, the walk ride procedures to work using the bus, train, bike, or a combo of those. It's a very transit-oriented area, but she agrees that adding more cars turning on and off of Van Zandt Street is dicey, both for cars and also buses, pedestrians, and cyclists.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why we're concerned. Even if the level of service at the stop signs isn't something that's necessarily impacted, it's definitely going to have an impact on how many cars are coming in and out of there. And of course, the assumption can't be made that anyone moving in here is just because of its location. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily likely to be using the other transit options. But the other point with that too, Becca, and we talk about this a lot, is that the fact that someone may be able to leave there and then commute to work doesn't mean that they wouldn't require a vehicle for all the other aspects of their life.
Right. And someone also brought up that the fact that we do not have a grocery store in East Norwalk, so deliveries will increase.
Yeah. And I think, deliveries and, even stuff with people don't really think about this, but when you have 22 units or 77 over at Cemetery Street, depending on how leases are done, and even when they're first built, you tend to have a lot of people moving in and out. And, these moving trucks aren't going to go underneath in the garage, and they're going to be, blocking these narrow roads with their hazards on and, kind of creating havoc. But there's going to be, you're going to have mail delivery and UPS delivery and Prime delivery and takeout food delivery and possibly, odd type deliveries as well. And not some of that does get factored into traffic reports, just so folks know. But they're based on formulas that I think were pre-COVID. And so I'm not quite sure how relevant those would be. Okay, so is that a question on the latest on Norton?
Well, there was earlier.
Okay.
I think you
all right, just
with
with the auto club. So again, like I was saying, there's lots of stuff going on with that. We seem to be getting bits and pieces now. And in fact, even today, Planning and Zoning posted some of their comments over to the commission, clarifying how they're going to be taking a look at how they allocate for parking. And I got to tell you, folks, after I read it, it's one of these things I read 10 times. And the more that I read these single two sentences, the less sense it made to me. And so I ended up sending the sentences over to Brian Baker, the principal planner there, and asked him if he could give that back to us literally in layman's terms. because I wanted to make sure that they weren't going to try to dilute the parking even further. ENNA contends that the traffic study that was done neglected to take into account the realistic amount of events that would go on there, and they certainly didn't take into account what the maximum occupancy would be if all of the event space there was being used at the same time. And also, someone raised a point today to say that there could be events that are one right after the other in both of those large event spaces. So you could have 300 people at an event that goes to, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then you have, or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you have another event that goes from, say, 5 to 11 with another 300 people. That could actually exist in both event spaces there. So you could have, 600, you could have 1,200 cars, kind of coming and going, and some of them could be overlap between when one event ends and another one starts. So essentially none of that was taken into account with the traffic. And we don't know that any of it was taken into account with the parking, but we hope that Brian will get back to us tomorrow and answer some of those questions.
Okay, one last question about Jimmy's Deli and the traffic study that will be done. Will it take into account the overflow parking from the new construction at Mill Pond, mainly addressing, visitors to the property, and also any of the retail spaces that might pop up there?
Yeah. So the traffic study, that's one of the documents that is posted on the city's website. So if you want to read it for yourself, I mean, it can be a lot of pages, but the bulk of it is really covered in like the first 10 pages or so. Traffic studies are required to take into account a couple of things. All of the existing development and uses around this property, including what exists there now, say Berman Crown, retail uses, etc. And they're also required to take into account proposed and in progress uses that go out. I forget how many years they have to go out, but if there's something already in the pipeline, they have to take that into account too. So they would have had to have accounted for 77 for the 77 units at Cemetery, in addition to Berman Crown and the existing ones.
Okay, how does that play into the fact that there is an active fire station right across the street?
That I'm not sure if I saw that mentioned in there or not, but fire departments have no blocking, and they also have the right of way. They also have the automatic signaling there too, to be sure that they can block off the with the light to block off the traffic. But that's a good point actually. And I'm actually going to add that one to the list. Anyone else? Another thing about Cemetery Street too that came up. We are starting to question, despite the naysayers on Facebook. I was out at that site this weekend, and I have to tell you, I am questioning just exactly how these measurements were taken for the height of the building. We do know the city recently changed the formula for how they do these, and we think that this development was, probably part of that reason. But I'm starting to question not only the height but also the setbacks, and if they've gone right up to the line and they're right at the line, that's one thing. But if they're technically even an inch over the line or an inch too high, then that becomes a problem. The remedy in Norwalk is never going to be to, knock it down and start over again. But we certainly have to find out what recourse at least the abutting neighbors would have if this thing is either, over the line or too high or both. It's also, there's also some issues there about the way that they're managing their runoff. There's a big pile of debris and garbage that's in the back. The stuff that's coming off of their site is blocking up the storm drains that have the filters in them. So those are filled with debris as well, and we have some pictures of that. So, and then not to mention, folks may have already been reading about the fact that they seem to be violating the noise and construction ordinances by starting too early, working too late. And in fact, they were out there before 8 a.m. yesterday on Sunday morning, right on top of the neighbors on Easter morning. So we are not happy.
There was one last question about Norden. In
Okay.
addition to catered events, is there a type of daily cafeteria or restaurant for members? Just trying to get an idea about food deliveries that will go in and out.
Yep. So there is some limited food service there for the members. There's also liquor service as well. So we would expect routine deliveries for events going in and out of there. It's also something too where it's been a lot of years, before there's or since there's been any activity there. And one of the things that we have mentioned now to the city, and we will again, is these, the deliveries and the fact that there's, going to be liquor served, but also with all the food service, it's something that we don't want to create something with odors and rodents and everything else as well coming off the site now. The application does indicate that they're not going to have outdoor events. But again, based on some other stuff that we're reading, we're questioning that as well. And unfortunately, it's going to fall to the abutting neighbors and the apartments and the folks across the track to kind of police that. The city's certainly not going to go out there on Sunday and see if there's a big old barbecue going on outside with 100 people or so. Okay. I think, Charles, if you want to do the stop video.
Okay.
And
will do.
And I'll offer to, and you can hop off as well. Thanks for staying on late.
You're
and
welcome.
I'll offer to stay on for a few minutes. So if there's anyone who wants to stay on and doesn't want to be on our public recorded video of this, just wait until we stop the video, and then you can raise your hand or just hop in.